Are players dumb just because they don't know or understand what the GM expects of them? Does this make the game master the smartest player at the table?
It's a fair point, Ted. Why don't we discuss, is the game master the smartest person in your RPG group?
I'm Nerdarchy Ted.
I'm Nerdarchy Dave. Welcome to Nerdarchy, for nerds, by nerds.
Well, let's just see what this video is all about.
One of the things, and it's kind of very old school holdover, I believe, is this idea that the game master or dungeon master or referee or storyteller, whatever system you're playing, whatever you want to call the person that is technically running the game, is this hierarchical position at the table, as opposed to they're just a different player with another role that's different than the role of the other players. And because of that viewpoint, and that hierarchy, it almost speaks to the sense that that person is somehow superior or smarter than everyone else at the table.
Yeah, it's a very big point, and I think there's a lot of people out there who still kind of hold this over from whether it be earlier editions or the change in just the RPG industry, and they still feel like this is an aspect from when things were in our group a more adversarial GM.
Well, yeah, and I don't know if it's a holdover or if it's just something that's still perceived that way, because even younger gamers, I see them talk about it in another way, and that is, well, why isn't the DM fixing a problem at the table when there's a problem with the group, right? Why aren't they stopping this? Why aren't they doing this? Where a lot of times in the communities that I'm looking at adults, not children, but all adults. And I'm like, well, if you're all adults at the table, why is this one person's job to fix the problem, intercede, or whatever? Now, it could very well be, but I think it's not any more or less their job as the GM than it is someone else at the table. Like, we're all responsible for having fun and interacting with each other in a social circumstance. And if someone is doing something at the table, not necessarily in the game, but as part of the group that is harmful, disruptive, then anybody can speak up, and more than likely you should talk about it as a group, not in the sense that you should be piling on this person. It's just more evidence that even today's gamers are still like, oh, the GM is this hierarchical position, and they which comes with not only this idea that they're the superior or smarter person, but they also bear a lot more responsibility for everybody at the table.
That was going to be my direction of, doesn't the GM have enough to do? If they're prepping, planning, running the game, if there's something else going on, shouldn't somebody else step up and be like, hey person, can we quell this? Can we stop this so that everybody can have fun, rather than be like, oh well, let's just give the GM more responsibilities on top of everything else.
Yeah, so, fun at the table is everyone's responsibility, and, it should not just be the GM's, right? So, but again, that's just another factor taken away from, no, the GM shouldn't be the superior position. They just have a different role in the game than everybody else. Now, it would be different if the GM was introducing things into the game that were harmful to the group dynamic or whatever. Then yes, absolutely. But again, if you're the person doing the thing, you're not also going to probably be the person to call yourself out on it as well. Now, Nerdator Doug did a great article over on the website that goes into depth on his positions and thoughts about GMing and, the GM's role and why, the GM isn't the smartest person. And also, in some ways, this can be a bit egotistical or arrogant, right? To think, especially when, as the GM, you actually just have more information than everyone else because you're prepping the adventures. Maybe it's a homebrew campaign that you made up, so you just have more of the details. I don't think that actually makes you smarter. It's just you're better informed on that subject because you made this stuff up.
There's absolutely a major difference between being smarter and being well informed. I've gamed for decades, and I've never been confident as the GM that I'm the smartest player in the room. So I've never had to worry about this. So
yeah. Well, speaking of that article, we'll put a link up in one of these cards and in the description below so that you can go check that out as well as another resource along with this topic as well.
All right, so I guess we'll start off, why is it that the DM doesn't have to be the smartest player in the role?
Well, for one, it's a collaborative game, right? We should be all working together. So, hierarchies tend to disrupt that. Now in many cases I've played in games where the GM doesn't even direct kind of like the storyline, and it's driven by the players and what they've decided to do. Right. So, for that reason alone, like they don't have to be the smartest because the players are kind of directing the action and they're reacting to them. I've run many games like that where, maybe at some point we go away from whatever the plots that I had laid out to things that the players wanted to pursue in the game. We start tackling those.
Yeah, when you start getting into, player directed agency, it's like, oh, well, I played a game, I think it was back in 2015, where it was Dungeon World, where like I signed up for a game at a convention, never played Dungeon World before, didn't know how it worked, and I was the first player at the table. So the DM or the GM was like, "Oh, what do you want today's adventure to be about?" And I'm like, "What?" I was blown away.
I signed up for you to take me on an adventure, not to tell you the adventure.
So I'm like, "Oh, okay. Well, I'm gonna roll up a dwarven cleric, and we're gonna go look for a relic, an artifact of my people." He's like, "Sure, no problem." I was like, "What?" Like, I was so flummoxed that was an option. And since then I've done a lot with player agency in my games, and we've talked about it here on the channel numerous times. But those kind of games are out there.
So, I mean, using that example, in some ways, you're actually in charge of the adventure and what you were doing. And then the GM's role was to react to that and figure out, well, what does that look like and interpret this thing that you wanted to do. Also, another thing is like, you see like GMs that think they need to know all the rules and be the arbitrator of everything. Well, they have to make decisions and make calls on the fly. But knowing all the rules, I don't think is one of the things that is required. You can have people at the table with better rules mastery than you, and you can lean on them when you need to because you know, like, oh, Joe, or Samantha, how does this thing work? I forget. And I've run a Monster of the Week game where I've played with people who I know played the game a lot more than me. So if I wasn't sure, I would just ask them. And they would give me, the best information they had, and so like even on that level of the rules, we can be collaborative.
So like you can literally have you as the DM, you can control the story, and if you have someone at the table that understands the rules far better than you do, you can be like, look, you're going to be the rules master. Hopefully it's somebody that you 100% trust and isn't going to abuse that position. But there have been many times that a rule question has come up and I've pointed to, be it Dave or one of the other players at the table. And I'm like, look, instead of looking this up, do you know what this is? And, it gets, espoused or summarized, and then boom, we move on from there rather than breaking up the action to go look up and see exactly how that works. It's so much easier. And, if you've got people at your table, that's a perfect way to do it. If you're a new GM, and again, you have somebody that you can trust, it's like, boom, you handle rules calls, I'll handle rule judgments. And, you just do the story from there. And it's a great way to get somebody who's interested in running a game without having to memorize all of those rules.
Yeah, I mean, and at the end of the day, this is, role-playing games are collaborative endeavor. And, and we've played with people in our own games at our own tables that are way smarter than we are, right? I have a GED. I didn't even finish high school, and I'm playing in a game and about to run a game for someone who's an emergency room doctor. That man saves lives. I've been a construction worker for most of my life before doing this, right? Even some other people are like high end in the corporate world, so it takes all types. And also like that doctor has been playing in Ted's games for years and loves playing in Ted's games. And so like this idea that the hierarchy needs to be there, and at the top of the hierarchy should be the smartest person. And also, right, the other thing that you'll see online is that smartest person is supposed to punish the dumber people at the table for getting things wrong, and there should be severe consequences, which used to be a very old school adversarial role of the DM, which I encounter less and less. And even like in our own games, we used to play that way more, and we've definitely pulled back from that over the years. As I just personally, for me, it's less fun to play that way. Obviously, if players do things in games, yes, there should be consequences. but they don't always have to be severe. And it depends. Like, what are the consequences for? Is it because of shitty behavior? I'm going to be like, yeah, you can be a little bit harsher there, as opposed to, they didn't do things the way you thought they should do them. And again, you being the person that has all the information, that understands that they should have did it this way when they might have very little information or none of the information. There's a huge difference between, a tactical miscalculation in the game, because you don't have all the information or you're not a real world tactician, as opposed to like you decide to murder the guard in front of a mob of people, which I would classify as kind of shitty behavior, right? Like you're supposed to be the heroes. If you're being heroic and you fail at the thing, sure, there could be consequences, but they don't have to be the most severe consequences in the game. Hopefully they lead to more interesting and fun adventures.
With all of that in mind, using that specific example of like murdering the guard. Now, if the aim of the game is to be heroes and create heroic story, the player has made the declaration, I'm just going to go kill this guy. You can stop the action for a moment and be like, well, does your character know better? Are you sure you want to do that? And let them know about the possible ramifications of those actions. I always prefer more heroic stories. I like to be the good guy. There's enough crap in this world and what have you. I don't need to go play, a villain in my RPG. Yeah. When I look at these things, I'm like, all right, if somebody's making a dumb decision, don't just be like, all right, and start layering the consequences. Give them a way to backpedal. Now, I've got experience, running for, my kids, as well as, having gamed for, decades with adults, and I've made a lot of poor decisions, and I've played against adversarial GMs where it's like, oh, a player didn't show up tonight, his character's dead. Like, there's no need to punish severely the characters or the player for in-game or out-of-game actions that they don't know what the consequences are. There's some really great examples in that aforementioned article. Against, low-level characters going up against the Night Hag. Well, the players have no clue what that creature is, both in-game or even out-of-game. There's no need to just slaughter them because they didn't have that information.
They're like, an old lady? I could totally kick an old lady's ass. She's going down, Granny.
So, you can change until the moment happens where the Night Hag does something that proves it's a Night Hag. Maybe it is just an old lady. Maybe you need to alter your story so that these characters can do something heroic. Or maybe you need to think back of, well, how can I inform them of this creature's power so that they can make an educated decision as to what the best course of action is? This collaborative story element, is there. Not everything is set in stone, and there's no need to punish bad decisions that are uninformed.
Yeah, I mean, and you see the players going down this road. You can intercede, and in the Night Hag example, you can have a flashback for one of the characters of a nursery rhyme or story they were told when they were children, and they start like drawing the correlation and connections between this horrific creature in that story with what's before them, so they have a little bit better idea. In the instance of the watch, the guard, without breaking immersion, you're going to be like, let me clarify. So your intent is to murder this guard in front of the crowd of people. As you draw back your weapon, you hear a gasp and murmur amongst the crowd, and you can see their mood changing, right? To try and emphasize the fact that what you're doing is not an acceptable norm. And also there's a huge difference between doing something that as a person is a bad idea and would never do, and something where you're like trying to take action based off information you have, which may be incomplete, right? In the case of the Night Hag, how do you know that's a Night Hag? What's a Night Hag? Like, do you even know? But everyone pretty much knows committing crimes in front of a crowd of people, bad idea. Committing crimes are generally wrong. And murder tends to be a bad thing. So like in that instance, like as the GM, there is not much more you have to do. Like I feel like the players have enough information there to be like to make an informed decision, even if they decide to make a bad decision.
My take on the Night Hag, they decide they're going to go full bore and they're going to go all out attack. The Night Hag's getting out of there. It's got an egress plan, whether it's a secret door, whether it's a teleport spell, whether it's something. I'm not gonna let them, I'm not gonna let the Night Hag just slaughter them because it's so far out of their weight class. I've used that example, numerous times throughout numerous campaigns because there's no gain for me. If I slaughter the party, that's the end of that story.
Well, let's take a step back too, right? Like if a GM like sets up this kind of scenario, and we look at the monster, and the monster's goal is actually to corrupt people, and especially the virtuous, and not to slaughter people. Like the GM isn't really doing a good job either there, and they're not showing they're the smartest person by just slaughtering the players because they attack the Night Hag. Like the Night Hag might want them to all get away, so she's another crack at corrupting them, and maybe she's already done her work, with the person that she's captured, right? So she wants that person reintroduced into society so that the seeds that she's planted can take root. And also that's way more interesting than just killing the party. Trust me, there's times every GM has wanted to kill the party, but we don't have to give into those impulses. We can be the better person and let them go. And also it generally is not the more interesting thing to do.
And I look at that as like, okay, the Night Hag lets the people take the kid back. That Night Hag now has a whole new series of targets of, look, here's virtuous people who are looking to do good. Yeah. Well, now let's see how I can corrupt them.
How I can tempt them.
So like that's far more interesting and far more fun. And then when the party is a high enough level to actually take out the Night Hag, that's when the story beats can get to that kind of point. But until then, machinations. Because that's what hags are going to do. It's about survivability and, their source of power. They're never going to be like, well, I might die here. Let's go full bore. Nah.
I would say in conclusion, right, is the game master the smartest player at the table? Who cares? It doesn't matter, right? Like our goal is to have fun, hopefully with a group of friends, and tell these stories together. And you know what? Everyone's going to take part in it. No matter what your IQ is at the table, it doesn't matter. Everyone can have something to contribute to make this a fun and interesting experience. And I think personally we should look at it collaboratively and work together towards those ends. I'm not saying like you should never kill a player character. Bad things can't happen to them. Everything has to be hunky-dory all the time. That's not what I'm saying. But but at the same time, you don't have to be punitive for players not knowing what you expect and want from them. Let us know down in the comments below your thoughts, your ideas. What do you think about GMs who think they're the smartest person at the table and the adversarial GM role?
While you're down there, don't forget to do all those fun things like share, subscribe, even go ahead and attune to that notification bell so you don't miss a single video.
Quick reminder, we drop new videos here on the channel Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, so come on back, but you can't wait till then. Here's another video you can check out up here. D&D Buzzwords and Metagaming.
So until next time,
stay nerdy.